For the latest on what's really going on here, let's bring in journalist at Rebel News, Adam Soos, who's been covering the protests from on the ground in Canada. Adam, thanks for being with us.
Hey, happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Just first, if you would, give us an overview down here south of the Canada border, if you will. What's going on? What's the latest?
Yeah, it's become troubling, certainly. While some provinces, mostly the western provinces, Saskatchewan, Alberta, are trending towards hopefully opening due to some border protests and some stronger action by truckers. Out east, which tends to be the more liberal part of the country, they are doubling down. The trucker convoy, which drew international attention and support against vaccine mandates, which are still in place for much of the country, have garnered the opposite response, seemingly, from Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister, and the Mayor in Ottawa. They have effectively declared a state of emergency. We're looking at minus 15 degrees Celsius, so very cold there. And they've actually made it illegal to even bring a jerry can of fuel so these people can heat their trucks, or you can actually be arrested for bringing a sandwich to these folks who are peacefully protesting. Furthermore, just breaking now, and the story is basically developing, we don't have the full ruling, but part of this protest and one of the big emblems along with these truckers has been honking. A Supreme Court, or at least a federal court judge, has allegedly, and we're just getting reports of this now, deemed it illegal to honk in Ottawa, and there's a temporary interim ban on honking within the nation's capital. So very much Soviet-style control taking place in this country right now.
We also know the tensions, Adam, are rising at one of the U.S.-Canada border's busiest ports of entry over a vehicle blockade that has halted traffic, disrupted services. Freedom Convoy is calling the blockade at the Alberta crossing unlawful. What's going on?
Yeah, so I mean, I think they've definitely mischaracterized what is happening there. I flew over as they were starting to form that, and I've flown back since. We've also had two people on the ground. There are vehicles off to the sides of the road. There is a passage. Emergency vehicles, buses, local citizens are able to get through. But what's developed and what is actually interesting is about 15 minutes away, 15 minutes north, so further into Canada, near the next adjacent town, which is Milk River, the RCMP, our federal police force, have effectively erected their own barricade, and thousands of people have now began to pile up on the other side of that. So they've effectively erected as much of a blockade as anybody else, and people are starting to pile up at that point. Now, all of this leading up and culminating to an announcement today from our premier here in Alberta, Jason Kenney, someone who was once a real champion of freedom, religious freedom, and who has very much since the onset of COVID-19 gone along with Justin Trudeau on most things, despite the odd sort of outburst of opposition. So today he's set to make an announcement, and many suspect that, of course, he'll deny that it has anything to do with the truckers, but many suspect that the pressure the truckers presented will result in our vaccine mandate here in Alberta anyways being dropped as a result of those actions.
Where does it look like this is going in Ottawa at this point? I mean, how long can the truckers hold out, and what's public opinion like? I mean, you're actually up in Canada covering this, speaking to people every day. Are people, do we get some sense as to whether the folks of Canada are with them, and what does the polling tell you, and what are you picking up from talking to people?
Yeah, the fact that $10 million were donated to these people in support of this truck convoy and then taken away by the progressive radicals at GoFundMe, and they originally intended to donate it to some of their left-wing friends. But the liberal media and the mainstream media, which is virtually all state-funded, very few outlets, including ourselves, are covering this without a state narrative on it. The Prime Minister, they're all harbinging this ridiculous narrative that these are all racists and white supremacists. Of course, there's tons of Sikh, Hindu, Muslim, every background you can imagine, people who drive trucks in this country, despite what they'd have you think. But there is so much pressure from mainstream media to tell us that this is fringe. But then we are seeing thousands and thousands of people in cities across the country and thousands of people rallying as part of this convoy to Ottawa. So if they represent even a small percentage of the people who are backing this convoy, I think that the reality is that this is a majority. When I speak to people on the streets, even maybe people who are on board with the vaccine mandates and restrictions at the get-go, it's few and far between, other than your most radical progressive or someone who's going to toe the Liberal Party line, which is the party in Canada that very much the equivalent of Democrats, I suppose, though far more left-leaning. Only the people who are diehard loyalists to those parties are still opposed to this. this and are swallowing those media lies. From what I talk to people in the streets, admittedly, likely a bit of a biased angle, the people we're speaking to are largely attending these events in support. But the sentiment, both nationally and internationally, seems to be very positive.
GoFundMe, you mentioned this, is getting a lot of heat, and I think it obviously should, for shutting down the fundraising page for the Freedom Fighters convoy. And by the way, is that the what's their preferred nomenclature? Because we down south here in America keep calling it, the trucker convoy. How do they refer to it?
Yeah, Freedom Convoy seems to be one of them. Trucker Convoy, they kind of go by all of them, but one of the official channels sort of relaying information goes by Freedom Convoy. So yeah, there's a broad sort of there's a broad use of names being applied, but they'll respond to pretty much any of them. Yeah.
So the GoFundMe effort here was to take money, as you mentioned, almost $10 million, and give it out to left-wing groups in total defiance of what people who donated the money thought they were doing. I know there's also another GoFundMe-like site that has received, I believe, as of today, $4 million. But what is the status of GoFundMe with regard to what they've done with the truckers here? Are they going to release the funds to them? And how's the convoy doing when it comes to logistics?
Yeah, so with that, unfortunately, GoFundMe has caved completely. The convoy was basically saying with the funds they'd received, they were actually ready. I believe they were ready to camp out for 2 to 4 years in Ottawa until freedoms were restored. Those funds being taken away sort of undermines that, but those funds are being immediately redirected to the people. Originally, you had to request a refund. Now they're being refunded automatically. The big concern now, and something I'd like to mention, is that people who are supporting the truckers themselves, they're actually being now challenged with arrest, tickets, all these other problems. And so to sort of offset some of those negative costs, lots of these people aren't working right now. They've taken time aside. They certainly can barely afford to be fighting in this protest now that GoFundMe's retracted that money, but they can't afford tickets or lawyers. So at truckerlawyer.ca, we're actually fundraising. We've hired lawyers. We've got lawyers on the ground in Ottawa, basically intervening as police go to speak to lawyers, and we're crowdfunding all of that. So they certainly aren't alone. They do have that support network at truckerlawyer.ca, but a very troubling situation to say the least. But these people very much, the funds, I think, once they get back to the people, they will find a way to support these people. They will find a way to get it back. In fact, we just had a group of cowboys here in Alberta. They rode down to the border on their horses. It was quite a scene to see. And after that, they departed with, despite the fact that this is now allegedly illegal, they've departed with supplies and gas, and they're heading to Ottawa as well to fuel them up and help them. Let's be clear about this. What they're doing, what the police are doing, is illegal. They can't simply detain and take property from individuals without a warrant, without due cause. What they're doing is illegal. And what's wild is the lawlessness by authorities in this country. They have been doing illegal things in this country for 2 years without consequence, and they continue to threaten those of us who simply want to be free with legal consequences. I think we should all be living by the same rules, not just those under their thumb.
Totally agree. Adam, great work up there. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks so much. Really appreciate it.